Hey Coffee Dude, it's Booty Gem here, and I want to jump into this. I've been doing a lot of videos on race, and this dichotomy of white pride, black pride is something I've been wanting to talk about a lot. And your video just gave me the perfect opportunity. Um, and before I begin, this isn't an opposing view by any stretch of the imagination. I really enjoyed watching your video. I thought you did a really good job of addressing the points, and kudos to you. Um, for me, and you touched on this, the white thing, the white pride, white is such a nebulous, meaningless concept. It means so much. I mean, I'm of Irish and Italian ancestry, but white means a whole lot more than that. It encompasses a lot, like you said. And that's the thing about when we talk about white, we don't have the shared experience. I mean, even within my own family, my Irish ancestors had a much different experience than my Italian ancestors. It was tough on both of them, but they were different experiences. They came to the country at different times. They experienced different racial hatreds, but there isn't a shared history there. And their history, just the history within my own family, isn't shared among other whites. Their history of they did face discrimination and racism. It was much different for English or French or Germans that came to this country. Much different. Not saying it was better or worse, but it was different. That's the point. So there isn't this shared history. In fact, you go back 100 years, my Irish and Italian ancestors weren't even considered white in this country. They became white. Something that a lot of people don't understand. You go back into the 1850s, 1860s. I mean, Irish they were calling them blacks turned inside out. So when you have that historical understanding, you realize how nebulous a concept race is. It changes. Oh, you weren't white, now you're white. So and then we have the reality. We have a history of 43 white presidents. The majority of our CEOs in the Fortune 500 companies, the majority of them are white men. And the average school curriculum is learning about great white men, right? Great dead white men with a sprinkling of a handful of people of other races, right? If we're going to be honest about it, you have to understand that while it's not explicitly taught that whites are the greatest, when you sit through 12 years or whatever it is, when you sit through a public school curriculum in this country, and you're bombarded with great white person after great white person after great, and then every once in a while, here's a great black guy. It sends an implicit message, and I think we have to be cognizant of that. Whiteness is celebrated every day in this culture. I was just watching an interview with Bruce Lee. This is back in the 70s, and he's talking about how he couldn't get this starring role for Kung Fu, I think it was, because he was Chinese. That's just in the 70s. It's not that long ago. And they were worried how white people would react to that. Hollywood for so long has been the celebration of whiteness. And thankfully that's beginning to change, but we still have a long way to go. Now, on the flip side, when we talk about black pride, and this is where I think Witzke Man does a disservice to the discussion, because he wants to, let's not talk about slavery. But slavery is what gives black pride its meaning, because it's not this disparate group of people who have no common history and who just decide, let's talk about black pride. You have to understand because the slavery to understand black pride. Okay? the slaves came from all different parts of Africa, different tribes, different nations. They spoke different languages, but when they got on that boat, when they arrived here, when they arrived in the New World, which wasn't so new, we just called it new because we stole it. But when they arrived here, that shared experience, they became a group with a shared identity, a shared history. And that shared struggle of slavery, Jim Crow, of segregation, of fighting for civil rights, on up to now with fighting the drug war, which is very much aimed at people of color. Black people suffer much harsher laws. We have crack cocaine laws that we're all aware of, higher incarceration rates for blacks. The struggle continues. You know, it didn't end back in the 60s. And so we have to understand that history to understand Black Pride. Because Black Pride is part of that struggle. It's a struggle against the stereotypical view of blacks as being stupid, violent. You can go on with all the negative stereotypes that have been put out by Hollywood, that have been, you know, in numerous different ways. That, you know, I remember in Malcolm X's autobiography, he talks about dyeing his hair and straightening it, putting all these really harmful chemicals in just so he could look more white. That's fucked up, you know. And Black Pride is a struggle against that. It's a, you know, slap you in the face and say, what are you doing? You don't need to be white. You've got a glorious, beautiful history, a glorious past. Your ancestors were kings, had some of the most glorious civilizations the world has ever known. When the white man was still living in caves and in the Stone Age, you were building pyramids and great civilizations in Nubia and Egypt. And it's not to put one culture down over another, but when you have a people that have been so downtrodden, so oppressed, so exploited, so slapped around, and then they realize, hey, we're not as bad as they've been telling us. Look at that, you know, Haile Selassie. Wow, you know, that's awesome. The great scientists and inventors that most of us don't even know about. You know, the light bulb couldn't have came about without the help of a black scientist. Most of us probably don't know that. That's okay. But Black Pride is about going back and learning that stuff and being proud of it. It's a much different experience. It's a much different thing than white pride. White pride, every day in this culture is a celebration of whiteness. There's no need. There's just no need for it. It's just ridiculous. Black pride is a struggle against a history of oppression, and it has a rightful place in this society. I don't think anybody who has an understanding of the history and the present would have a problem with that. That's my 2 cents. Peace, brother.